There's also the brake. It does the exact opposite of the gas pedal. Now you may say, well, this is the good branch, or this one's the good one, that one's the bad one. Well, they're really not good or bad. We want to have a balance between the two, because imbalance is what actually can lead to certain symptoms. And I'm going to show you how autonomic imbalance can lead to symptoms, and how our diets can affect our autonomic nervous system and lead to symptoms. And if the symptoms get bad enough, they may even get called by a name called the disease. So we have the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, the gas pedal, the brake, big pupils, little pupils. Stimulates flow of saliva. This has to do with digestion. Inhibits flow of saliva. Slow heart, fast heart. Dilates your bronchioles. Constricts bronchioles. Well, you need your bronchioles dilated to run from that grizzly bear, don't you? Otherwise, you can't breathe very well. Digestion increases, decreases. Lowers your blood sugar and stores it as glycogen, burns glycogen, and turns it into sugar. Stimulates bile, inhibits bile, up-regulates immune system. You don't need to be, and down-regulates. You don't need to be fighting a cold when you're running from a grizzly bear. Unnecessary functioning. Motility speeds up, slows down. Sphincter relaxes, sphincter constricts. Lowers body temperature, raises. There's a lot of other things. This is simplified, but you can see how elegant this is that we have this system of the autonomic nervous system. Now, let's take an example of a patient that walks in my office, okay? And they say, Doc, I have a problem where I'm going to the bathroom all the time, okay? I have diarrhea. And I also have this urgency to go to the bathroom, urinate all the time. Okay, well, they may have a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bladder syndrome. They also tend to have asthma. They tend to have lots of sinus problems. They may have a low blood pressure. So I may assess this patient and say, wow, this patient's parasympathetic nervous system is out of whack. Everything's on this side. So rather than saying that they have sinusitis and asthma and all these different diseases, it may be that it just turns out that their parasympathetic nervous system, for one reason or another, is actually overstimulated. Or they could have this side. Now, again, this is a simplification, but I can tell you that this happens all the time. I see patients all the time that have autonomic imbalance. This is a long list of all these different things that are based on the sympathetic side, parasympathetic side, and here on the sympathetic side. And so I would examine the patient and find out, for example, well, they're gagged, they have a big gag reflex, or their hands are very warm, or their pulse is slow, or they have a small pupil, et cetera, et cetera. And then I may give them a very specific diet to help them control their symptoms and change their autonomic balance. There's lots of things that affect the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. And I want to draw your attention to this. This is the adrenal cortex, and this is the adrenal medulla. So, and there's also other glands that are involved here. Your pancreas, pancreas tail and head, your thyroid gland on this side, different hormones here, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. So your autonomic nervous system also controls and is controlled by different hormones. Now, a lot of you people have probably heard about adrenal fatigue or adrenal stress or adrenal burnout. Well, this is something that really does happen, and it's a very important cause of symptoms and diseases. The adrenal gland is actually a short-term metabolic activator. For example, when the grizzly bear runs through the door, we put out something called adrenaline, and that gives us, partly at least, that burst of energy that allows us to react very quickly. On the other hand, when we're under stress, we may have another stress hormone called cortisol. And you guys may have heard about cortisol causing belly fat, right? All the commercials, take this stuff, it'll lower your cortisol level. Okay, so the adrenal gland allows the body to respond and compensate for stress. And it's sort of like a hormonal bank account. if we stress our adrenals too much, we actually run out of our bank account, and we can be very susceptible to all sorts of problems because of that. So there's two parts of the adrenal gland. There's the cortex and the medulla. The cortex is responsible for what are called adrenal corticoids, and it's also responsible for sex hormones. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and it can also have anti-aging properties. And the medulla is responsible for what's called catecholamines and puts out things like adrenaline. These hormones can actually save your life. If you came into the emergency department with an allergic reaction, guess what we would give you? We'd give you either epinephrine or we would give you steroids. That's pretty cool, isn't it? But if your adrenal glands can't handle that stress, you end up with an allergic reaction. So if your adrenal glands are depleted in cortisol or depleted in adrenaline, it actually leads to allergies. What other adrenal glands? Well, there's these little guys here sitting on top of your kidneys. They're very small. They're very powerful. Now, we've all heard that stress is bad for us. Everybody knows that stress. Why is stress bad? And our diets actually cause us stress. If you eat foods that are not nutritious, you'll actually stress your body. And I'm going to show you exactly how that happens. But high levels of adrenaline actually lead to high levels of cortisol. They sort of balance each other out. And if you are putting out too much cortisol, you'll actually cause a wasting or a lack of all these other hormones. You can see here, now all your adrenal cortical hormones start from this stuff here. It's called cholesterol. Cholesterol then becomes something called pregnenolone, and it goes down this pathway to cortisol, goes through your liver, and it eventually becomes cortisone. So if your body senses you're under stress all the time, whether it's because you're anxious, you're lacking sleep, you're working too hard, or you're eating stuff that's not good for you, like sugar or fried foods or other assorted junk, you will actually start to create all this cortisone to counteract all the damaging effects of those foods. And when this happens, your body will make less of all these other things, all these other important hormones like testosterone or estradiol or progesterone. And that can lead to symptoms. It can lead to menopausal symptoms. It can lead to fatigue. It can lead to osteoporosis. So it's extremely important that you keep your adrenal glands well-fed, well-rested, just like the rest of your body. They are so important to your overall health. Whoops. This is the quietest crowd I've ever spoken to. You're absorbing? Okay. Wellness is balance. Disease is imbalance. Okay, I use the autonomic nervous system as an example, okay, but these things can affect many different levels. I want to talk about balance for now because we want to have a balance in what we're eating. That's why you guys are here. You want to learn about, Doc, what should I eat? What should I not eat? How can I live longer and healthier and not end up with all sorts of chronic degenerative diseases? Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. Not that I'm that interesting, but when I was 19 years old, I was diagnosed as having an incurable disease. I was told that I had Crohn's disease. And I was told that I would have this disease my entire life, that I would need to take drugs my entire life, that I would probably need surgery, and that I had a high risk for cancer. And this was when I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college. It was 1978. And you can do the math.